Hey there, welcome back to the channel. Today we are continuing our tour of the instruments as we work to curate our playlist of relaxing classical music. So far we've discussed piano and violin, and learning all the instruments and their repertoire is important in transitioning from being a casual listener to a knowledgeable one. This process is a lot of fun, and by doing so, you begin to develop your own musical taste and preferences in interpretation, and we can do all of this just by listening to classical music. So today we are going to discuss the top 5 most relaxing pieces of classical music for the cello. Hey everyone, my name is Matthew, and welcome to Calm Insomniac, where we're a community of people trying to get a better night's sleep. If you're new here, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for notifications. As always, we have a few considerations we need to go over before we get into the actual pieces. First, let's quickly remind ourselves of the 4 criteria that can make classical music good for relaxation. And those are, we want the music to be instrumental only, repetitive, in a simple form, and have a consistent, calm tempo. If you want to find out more information about these criteria, then I suggest you watch this video over here. The next thing to remember is that music is subjective. These pieces are my personal opinion, and while they do fit the previously mentioned criteria, it might not be relaxing to you based on your personal preferences, and that's okay. And finally, as with my top 5 violin pieces, after making sure they fit the 4 criteria, I have chosen to omit any music by Bach, as well as any movements from a cello concerto, just to limit my possibilities a little bit, and also both of those categories deserve their own lists. So with those considerations out of the way, let's get into the top 5 most relaxing cello pieces. These are in no particular order, and let's start with number 1, which is Saint-Saëns' The Swan from the Carnival of the Animals. Saint-Saëns was a French composer, and the Carnival of the Animals is his most well-known work. The Swan is arguably the most famous piece on this list, and it is the penultimate or second-to-last movement of the Carnival of the Animals. This piece as a whole is a musical suite which humorously depicts many different animal species and was written in 1886. The entire piece is written for a very small chamber orchestra, but interestingly it includes 2 piano parts. The Swan, which is what we're discussing, only uses cello and the 2 pianos. Saint-Saëns was actually adamant that the Carnival of the Animals never be published during his lifetime. However, after he made an arrangement of the Swan for cello and 1 piano, he did allow that particular arrangement to be published in his lifetime. The Swan could be considered one of the more serious movements of the Carnival of the Animals, but its design is simple and beautiful. The cello melody is mostly based on ascending scales, which makes it very simple, and the 2 pianos play a true accompaniment role. The first piano part is often playing arpeggios, which are broken chords, or playing a chord 1 note at a time. And the second piano is taking on the role of a harp, playing chords sporadically to emphasize the musical phrase. This piece also uses the cello's higher range, which has a sweeter sound, and that is certainly a very soothing thing to hear. The cello and the pianos together create a lush, elegant atmosphere, and when discussing this movement, we shouldn't forget the legend of the swan song. That is that swans, the actual birds, are mute their entire life until they sing only once right before they die. This adds a poignant but beautiful element to the music, and it's another example of the relationship between sleep and death in the arts. The second piece on our list is Dvorak's Silent Woods. I personally feel that this piece is often overlooked compared to the rest of Dvorak's repertoire, but if you're a cellist, then you certainly know this piece. Antonin Dvorak was a Czech composer who liked to include folk music from his native Bohemia in his compositions. He also spent a good amount of time in America and famously wrote his Symphony No. 9 from the New World, and you're probably familiar with either the second or fourth movement of that symphony, and the fourth movement begins kind of like how the soundtrack to Jaws opens. Or I should say, the soundtrack to Jaws opens like the Symphony from the New World. Silent Woods was composed in 1883, and it was originally the fifth movement of a piano suite called From the Bohemian Forest. This included folk melodies from Bohemia, like Dvorak liked to do. However, the piano piece as a whole was only mildly popular. Dvorak himself wrote an arrangement of Silent Woods for cello and piano for a cellist friend's farewell concert, and this arrangement proved to be so popular that he created an arrangement for cello and orchestra, and this orchestral arrangement is what has remained popular today. In fact, there are many high-profile cello soloists who will use Silent Woods as an encore performance at their concerts. This piece has two elements which I really think enhance its relaxation qualities. The first is the piece is written for a relatively small orchestra, and notably the oboes are missing in the orchestration. I think this was done intentionally to leave out the somewhat, let's say, harsher sound of the oboe compared to the flute or clarinet, and I can say that as an oboist myself. And the second quality is the melody itself. Like Brahms' Lullaby, the melody is heavily relying on syncopation, or the melody is usually not playing on the beat. Because the music is at a slow tempo, this syncopation is not jarring at all, and we are once again creating a rocking feeling, which is very soothing to hear. And finally, I'll just mention that the orchestral accompaniment is rather simple, mostly relying on the strings, and when the woodwinds do play, they are usually playing a repetition of the melody. The third piece on our list is Bruch's Kol Nidre. Max Bruch was a German composer, and he is most known for his Violin Concerto No. 1, which is a major piece of the violin repertoire. Kol Nidre was written in 1880 and is based on two Hebrew melodies. Max Bruch himself was not Jewish, but he became friendly with a prominent Jewish family. The head of this Jewish family was a cantor at a synagogue and was friendly with some prominent Christian musicians. Bruch himself stated that he did not intentionally write Jewish music, rather he was writing music that was inspired by Jewish music because he felt these melodies were so beautiful. Kol Nidre is another piece written for cello and orchestra, and it is inspired by the Kol Nidre service of the Yom Kippur Jewish holiday. Yom Kippur means Day of Atonement, and in the Jewish religion, it is believed that on Yom Kippur, God seals his decision as to who will live and die in the coming year. What Jewish people are supposed to do in the days leading up to Yom Kippur is atone for their sins. Kol Nidre takes place in the evening service of Yom Kippur, and it is a religious declaration stating that this religious service is taking place with sinners. So they are recognizing that we have sinned in the past year, but we are okay to continue this religious service. So Bruch's music is based on the chanting of the cantor that would take place during this Kol Nidre service. If we take into consideration the subject matter, the piece is still relaxing, but it is definitely somber and very reflective. I think that this last quality, it being reflective, is especially helpful for sleep because when we're going to bed, we should try to reflect on our day and also let go of whatever had happened. I think listening to this piece is a beautiful, relaxing, but profound experience, and the piece is only about 11 minutes long, and it is worth listening to the entire way through, especially with your eyes closed, and just take time to reflect. The fourth piece on our list is Chopin's Cello Sonata, the third movement. Chopin is most known for writing pieces for solo piano, however he seemed to have a fondness for the cello since several of his works include prominent cello parts. This piece was written in 1846 and is the last piece that was published during Chopin's lifetime. In fact, this is one of only 9 pieces published during his lifetime that was written for a solo instrument other than piano. The third movement of this cello sonata is possibly one of the simplest pieces Chopin ever wrote. Chopin was known for writing highly virtuosic and improvisational sounding music. There is nothing flashy about this piece, and the piano accompaniment is quite simple compared to the rest of Chopin's repertoire. The piano part is strictly an accompaniment, however, there is a lot of a call and response relationship between the piano and the cello, which of course helps with repetition and familiarity, which is of course good for relaxation. Something else I like about this piece, but is also true for the other pieces on this list, is that it uses a large portion of the cello's very wide range. One of the coolest things about the cello is it is usually considered to be the closest sounding to the natural human voice. And hearing a familiar tone and resonance that is like the human voice can actually be very comforting, and I think this piece exemplifies that, especially when it goes into the cello's low range. Of course, this is also helped by the performer and their interpretation, but in the recording I'll link down below, the low range is very resonant but sweet at the same time. And the fifth and final piece on our list is Strauss's Cello Sonata, the second movement. Richard Strauss was a German composer who is most famous for his large-scale tone poems. In fact, you're probably familiar with the opening of his Also sprach Zarathustra because it was used as the opening music for Stanley Kubrick's movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. Strauss composed this piece in 1883 when he was 19 years old, and since this is such an early work of his, it lacks several of the characteristics that we would typically expect in his more mature works. In fact, some musicologists have compared this piece to the music of Mendelssohn, but none of these detract from the quality or beauty of the piece. The piece as a whole is considered standard repertoire for the cello. What I like about the second movement is it's actually the most turbulent on this entire list. And you might think that that would be a bad thing, but here's why I like it. The piano part is the most involved of any of the piano or orchestral parts on this list. And what happens is there's a really cool conversation that is taking place between the cello and piano. In most sonatas or solos, there will be a conversation between the solo and the accompaniment. What I like is that the piano accompaniment tries to take over and be more active than the cello, but the cello always overtakes it and brings it back to a calm state. So if you were listening to all 5 of these pieces, you might want to listen to the Strauss piece first to get the most turbulent one out of the way, but I think overall the second movement is still relatively relaxing, and for me, I really enjoy listening to it at night. There we go. Those are the top 5 most relaxing pieces of classical music for the cello. Let me know in the comments below which pieces did I miss or not include that you think are good for relaxation. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to like, subscribe, check out my website, and join my email list. Those links are down below. If you like this video and want more videos on classical music, then I suggest you check out this playlist over here. And if you want to see one of my recent videos on how diet affects sleep, that video is over on the side as well. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.